My greedy son and his wife kicked me, their old father, out onto the street with a single suitcase. They were already dreaming of the $800,000 insurance payout after my accident. But I gave my last pennies to a homeless woman, and she whispered, "They'll come for you tonight. Hide in that motel." I trusted her, and when they saw me alive and ready for battle, their faces turned white as ghosts, because the one who was thrown out into the blizzard is coming back, and now they will pay for everything. Before continuing, subscribe to the channel and write in the comments what time it is in your region right now. My name is Percy Curtis. I'm 67 years old, and I live in Phoenix, Arizona. Spent 42 years building my auto repair business from nothing into a chain of 4 shops across the valley. Sold it 3 years back for a decent sum, thinking I'd earn my rest. Always believed that family was everything, that blood meant loyalty. Turns out I was betting on the wrong horse. My son Jeffrey wasn't always the man he is now. I remember when he was 7, running to meet me at the door after my shifts, grease still under my fingernails, his face lit up like Christmas morning. "Dad, Dad, can we work on the Corvette together?" That Corvette, a 1967 beauty sitting in my garage, my weekend project, my escape. Jeffrey used to hand me tools, ask questions, soak up every word like a sponge. Back then I thought we had something unbreakable. Then came Shannon. 4 years ago, Jeffrey brought her home. Shannon Johnson, 33 years old, real estate agent with perfect teeth and eyes that calculated the value of everything they looked at, including me. She came from nothing, she told us over dinner that first night, made herself through sheer determination. I respected that. What I didn't see then was the hunger behind those eyes, the kind that never gets satisfied no matter how much you feed it. The wedding was nice. I paid for most of it, didn't mind. Jeffrey was happy, or seemed to be, but within 6 months I noticed the changes. My son stopped dropping by on Sundays. Phone calls got shorter, colder. When they did visit, Shannon did most of the talking, always steering conversations toward money, investments, my retirement plans. Jeffrey just nodded along, this glazed look in his eyes like a man watching his life from behind a window. "Dad, you're getting older," Shannon said one evening, her voice sweet as antifreeze. "Have you thought about what happens to all this when you're gone? The house, the savings? Wouldn't it be easier to transfer some things now? Avoid all that messy probate? A year ago, I made the biggest mistake of my life. I signed over my house, the one on Desert Willow Drive, worth $685,000, putting it in Jeffrey and Shannon's names. The lawyer, my lawyer, tried to warn me. "Mr. Curtis, at least keep a life estate provision. It guarantees you can live here until death, no matter what." I added it to the deed. Figured it was just paperwork, insurance against a problem that would never come. I was wrong about that, too. They moved in 6 months later. "Just to help take care of you, Dad," Jeffrey said, though I didn't need taking care of. Shannon immediately started redecorating, erasing 40 years of memories like they were stains on carpet. The photos of my late wife came down. The furniture I'd built by hand went to storage. My Corvette got shoved to the back of the garage, covered with a tarp like something shameful. Then came the real pressure. Shannon found out about my savings account, $470,000 sitting in Chase Bank, the result of decades of careful management and the business sale. She brought it up at dinner one night, casual as discussing weather. "Jeffrey and I have been looking at investment opportunities. Real estate in Scottsdale is booming. If you moved some of that savings into a joint account, we could really multiply your money." "My money's fine where it is," I said. Her smile didn't reach her eyes. "Of course. We're just trying to help. You're not getting any younger, Percy. What if something happens? What if you can't manage your own affairs? Wouldn't you want Jeffrey to have access to help?" The temperature in that house dropped 20 degrees over the following months. Shannon stopped pretending to be pleasant. Jeffrey stopped looking me in the eye. They whispered behind closed doors, looked at me like I was an obstacle, not a father, not a person. The morning of June 12th started hot. Phoenix in June is an oven, temperatures hitting 105, 110 by afternoon. I was in the garage by 7 trying to work on the Corvette when Jeffrey came out. No good morning, no small talk. "We need to talk," he said. Shannon stood behind him in the doorway, arms crossed, face set like concrete. "This isn't working," Jeffrey continued. "You live in here. It's our house now, and we need our space. We need you to leave." I set down my wrench, slowly, trying to process what I was hearing. "Leave? Jeffrey, this is my home. The deed has a life estate provision. I have the legal right." "Legal right?" Shannon's voice cut like a saw blade. "You signed the house over to us. It's ours. And we're done playing nursemaid to an old man who won't get out of the way." "Shannon," Jeffrey started, but she silenced him with a look. "Pack your things, Percy. Personal items only. You've got 2 hours." 2 hours? My voice cracked. "Where am I supposed to go?" Shannon shrugged. "That's your problem. Maybe you should have thought about that before being so stubborn about the money. Could have set yourself up nicely in a retirement community. But no, you had to hold on to everything like some dragon guarding gold." I looked at my son, my boy, waiting for him to step in to stop this. He stared at the floor. "Jeffrey?" He finally met my eyes. For just a second I saw something there, some flash of the kid who used to hand me tools. Then it was gone, shuttered behind cold indifference. "Just go, Dad. Make this easy." I packed one suitcase. 42 years of life in Phoenix, and I packed one suitcase. My hands shook as I grabbed clothes, a few photos, my wallet. The bank card was there, but when I tried to use the ATM in the hallway, my account was frozen. I checked my wallet. $40 in cash. Everything else locked away. By 11 in the morning, I was standing on the sidewalk, suitcase in hand, heat radiating off the pavement in waves. The thermometer on the neighbor's porch read 104 degrees. Shannon watched from the window, phone in hand. Jeffrey's car was already gone. I started walking. Didn't know where. Just away. The streets of Phoenix in June are brutal. Heat rises off asphalt like something alive, shimmering, distorting reality. I walked for hours, suitcase wheels scraping concrete, sweat soaking through my shirt. People passed in air-conditioned cars, not seeing me, or maybe seeing me and looking away. Just another old man in trouble. Nothing new in this city. By 4 in the afternoon, I'd made it downtown to the Greyhound station on North 7th Street. My shirt was drenched, throat dry as sand. $40. That's what my life had been reduced to. 4 decades of work, and I had $40. Near the entrance, a woman sat on the ground, back against the wall, weathered face tilted toward whatever shade she could find. Homeless, maybe 60 years old, with tired eyes that had seen too much. A cardboard sign rested against her knee. Anything helps. I should have kept walking. Should have saved that $40 for food, for water, for whatever came next. But something in her face reminded me of my late wife in her final days. That same exhaustion, that same quiet dignity, despite everything. I pulled out the bills and handed them to her. "All of it." She looked up, startled. "Sir, this is $40. "I know. Are you sure?" "More sure than I've been about anything all day." She studied my face, my sweat-stained clothes, my battered suitcase. Then she stood up, quicker than I expected, and her whole demeanor changed. The exhaustion was still there, but something sharp cut through it now, some alertness I hadn't noticed before. "You're Percy Curtis," she said, not a question. I stepped back. "How do you know my name?" "I heard your son talking on his phone yesterday. I was outside Chase Bank on Central, sitting near the entrance. He walked right past me like I was invisible. People always do. But I hear things. I remember things." She paused. "My name is Gail Thompson. I used to be a detective with Phoenix PD. 18 years on the force before they pushed me out." "Pushed you out?" "Uncovered some corruption in the department. Wrong people got embarrassed. They fabricated complaints, made my life impossible, forced retirement, lost everything over 2 years, apartment, savings, family. Now I'm here." She gestured at the wall behind her. "But I still have my instincts, and those instincts are screaming at me right now." I didn't know what to say. This woman, this stranger, knew who I was, knew my son. "They're coming for you tonight," Gail said, voice dropping low. "Your son and his wife. I heard him on the phone, clear as day. They're planning something, an accident. They kept saying accident, like they were practicing the word. Mentioned 800,000 in life insurance. Said you'd fall, hit your head. Simple. Clean." Tragic. The heat suddenly felt colder. That's insane. Jeffrey wouldn't he? Gail's eyes bored into mine. You just gave me your last $40. You're standing here with everything you own in a suitcase because your son kicked you out in 100-degree heat. You think he has limits? I wanted to argue. Wanted to believe she was crazy, that this was some scam, but something in her voice, the specific details, the conviction cut through my denial. What am I supposed to do? Hide. Tonight. There's a motel 3 blocks from your house. Desert Palms Inn on East Van Buren. Check in under a different name. Pay cash if you can. Credit card if you must. Don't go home. Don't try to confront them. Just disappear for 24 hours. I don't have cash. I gave it to you. She handed the $40 back. Take it. I'd rather be hungry than see you dead. I stared at the bills. Why are you helping me? Because 18 years as a detective taught me to recognize predators. Your son and his wife. They're predators. And you just did something kind for a stranger when you had nothing. That means something. She pressed the money into my hand. Go. Now. The Desert Palms Inn was exactly what $40 a night could buy. Crack paint, neon sign missing letters, parking lot full of cars that had seen better decades. I checked in as Walter Harrison, using my credit card, praying it wasn't frozen like the bank account. The clerk, a kid who couldn't have been more than 20, barely looked up. Room 114 smelled like old cigarettes and industrial cleaner. I sat on the bed, springs creaking, trying to process everything. Gail's warning echoed in my head. An accident. 800,000. Tonight, I couldn't sleep. Didn't even try. I sat by the window, curtain pulled back just enough to see the street. The motel was 3 blocks from Desert Willow Drive, close enough to see my former street from here if I knew where to look. At 2:47 in the morning, headlights swept down the road. I recognized the car immediately. Jeffrey's black Lexus, moving slowly, deliberately, down the street that led to my old house. It paused at the corner, idling for nearly 5 minutes. Then it continued past, disappeared around the block, came back, circling, hunting. My hands gripped the windowsill. Gail had told the truth. My son was out there at 3 in the morning, looking for me, planning whatever accident they'd discussed. The car finally left around 3:30. I watched it go, taillights fading into darkness. I thought about the past then, really thought about it. Not the recent past of Shannon's cold manipulation and Jeffrey's weakness, but further back. Jeffrey, at 12, helping me rebuild an engine, his face streaked with grease, grinning like he'd discovered treasure. Jeffrey, at 17, getting accepted to Arizona State, hugging me so hard I thought my ribs would crack. Jeffrey, at 25, calling me after a bad breakup, voice broken, needing his father. Where had that boy gone? When did he disappear? Or had I simply refused to see the changes, clinging to memories while the real Jeffrey transformed into someone else entirely? Sitting in that cheap motel room, watching dawn break over Phoenix, I made a decision. I wasn't running. I wasn't hiding anymore. I was going to fight back, not with fists or weapons, but with something sharper. The law, truth, justice, whatever you want to call it. I had resources they didn't know about. I had documents, contacts, 42 years of business experience that taught me how to read people, how to spot weakness, how to build something from nothing. If they wanted war, I'd give them war, just not the kind they expected. The Corvette flashed through my mind, still sitting in my garage, covered and forgotten. I'd get it back. I'd get everything back. Not because I needed the house or the money, but because they needed to learn that kindness has limits, that stealing from family has consequences, and that underestimating an old man is a fatal mistake. As the sun rose over the desert, turning the sky orange and gold, I felt something shift inside me. The victim was gone. Something else was waking up, something patient, something dangerous. I picked up my phone and started making calls. The next morning, I met Gail Thompson back at the Greyhound station. She looked different in daylight, less like a ghost and more like what she really was, a sharp woman who'd been knocked down but never broken. We found a bench in the shade, and I told her everything. The house transfer, the life estate provision, the frozen bank account, Shannon's relentless pressure for the savings. Gail listened without interrupting, her detective's mind already working. "They're playing a 3-stage game," she said finally. Stage 1 was getting the house. Stage 2 is your savings, 470,000. Stage 3 is the insurance money, 800,000. But here's the thing, Percy. They got greedy. If they'd waited, been patient, they could have had it all legally when you passed naturally. Instead, they rushed it. That's their weakness. So what do I do? She leaned back, eyes narrowing. You have a life estate provision in that deed? My lawyer insisted on it. I can live in the house until I die, legally. Then they violated it the moment they kicked you out. That's illegal eviction, breach of contract. You have grounds to sue. She paused. But you want more than that, don't you? I did. I wanted them to understand what they'd done, to face consequences that would stick. Tell me about yourself first. How does a detective end up here? Gail's face hardened. 2 years ago, I uncovered a kickback scheme in the department. Officers taking money from a bail bonds company, steering arrests their way. I reported it through proper channels. 3 weeks later, I was accused of evidence tampering on an old case. Completely fabricated, but they had paperwork. Witnesses who suddenly remembered things differently. I fought it for 8 months. Spent my savings on lawyers. They forced me into retirement, took my pension, lost my apartment 6 months later. My daughter stopped taking my calls, said I was an embarrassment. She looked at me. So yeah, I know something about family betrayal. We sat in silence for a moment. 2 people who'd been discarded, sitting in 100-degree heat, planning survival. I need to get into my safe deposit box at Chase, I said. I kept important documents there. The original deed with the life estate clause. My will. Business papers from when I sold the shops. Your account's frozen. Will they let you access the box? Different system. Box rental is paid annually. I renewed it in January. Gail nodded. Then that's step 1. Get your ammunition. The Chase Bank on Central Avenue felt like foreign territory. I'd been banking there for 30 years, but walking through those doors that afternoon felt like entering enemy camp. The branch manager, a woman named Patricia, who'd always been friendly, gave me a careful look when I presented my key. Mr. Curtis, we've been trying to reach you. Your son filed a concern about your well-being, requested access to... My safe deposit box is mine alone, I interrupted. My name only on the contract. Is that correct? Patricia hesitated. Yes, but... Then I'd like to access it. Now. She led me to the vault, her disapproval evident but legally powerless. Inside the box, I found exactly what I needed. The original deed, signed and notarized, with the life estate provision highlighted by my lawyer. My will, leaving everything to Jeffrey, but only after my death. Copies of the business sale documents showing the full $1.2 million transaction. And something I'd forgotten about, incorporation papers for Curtis Holdings, LLC, a shell company I'd created years ago to hold a small warehouse property on South 24th Street. The property was nearly worthless, just a storage facility I'd used for shop equipment, but it was an asset they didn't know about, an asset still in my name. I took everything, every document. Patricia watched as I stuffed papers into a manila envelope, her expression caught between concern and professional neutrality. Mr. Curtis, if there's something wrong, if you need help. I'm fine, Patricia. Better than I've been in months, actually. Walking out of that bank, envelope under my arm, I felt something I hadn't felt since Jeffrey's black. Lexus circled my street. Power. Not the kind that comes from money or property, but from knowledge, from having weapons they didn't know I possessed. I met Gail at a coffee shop on McDowell Road. She examined the documents with the practiced eye of someone who'd spent decades reading paperwork for lies and loopholes. This life estate clause is ironclad, she said. Any lawyer worth their retainer will tell you that. They broke the law, kicking you out. But here's what I'm thinking. You go after just the house, they'll fight it, drag it out, maybe win on some technicality. You need leverage. You need to hit them from multiple angles. What kind of angles? Your son's a financial consultant, right? Your daughter-in-law's in real estate? People in those professions live and die by their licenses, their reputations. If there was evidence of misconduct, regulatory violations, conflicts of interest. She let the thought hang. I thought about Jeffrey's phone conversations over the past year, the ones I'd overheard when he thought I wasn't listening. Clients who'd lost money, investment strategies that seemed aggressive, even risky. Shannon's bragging about closing deals above listing price, about having connections with appraisers. I don't have that kind of evidence, I said. Not yet. But it exists. People who cut corners in business always leave trails. You just need someone to follow them. That evening, back at the Desert Palms Inn, I did something I hadn't done in years. I made a list. Not of tasks or repairs, but of resources. Who did I know? What did I have? The motel room was stifling, even with the AC rattling full blast. But I ignored it, focused on the paper in front of me. Money. I had maybe $2,000 on my credit card before it hit the limit. That was it, until the bank account got unfrozen. Property. The warehouse on South 24th Street. Unknown to Jeffrey and Shannon. Documents. Everything from the safe deposit box. Proof of ownership. Proof of rights violated. People. Gail Thompson, former detective with nothing to lose and a sharp mind. That was one. I needed more. I thought about the business contacts from my auto shop days. Most were retired or had moved on, but there was one name that stuck. Russell Green, a property lawyer who'd handled the sale of my third shop. We hadn't spoken in 3 years, but he'd given me his card, said to call if I ever needed anything. I found the card in my wallet, creased and faded. Tomorrow, I decided. Tomorrow I'd make that call. Through the thin motel walls, I could hear a TV playing, someone's life continuing normally while mine had detonated. But instead of despair, I felt something cold and sharp settling in my chest. Jeffrey and Shannon thought they'd won, thought the old man would just disappear, maybe drink himself to death in some fleabag motel, make their lives easier. They had no idea what they'd woken up. I pulled out my phone and scrolled through Facebook, something I rarely did. There it was. Shannon's post from earlier that day. Heartbroken. Percy Curtis, beloved father, has been missing since yesterday. If anyone has information, please contact us. We're so worried. Comments flooded underneath. Sympathetic friends, concerned neighbors, people who had no idea they were reading fiction. The performance was impressive, I had to admit. Shannon had even managed to make her profile picture look tearful. Jeffrey's post was similar, shorter, but with the same manufactured concern. I took screenshots, evidence of their lies. Evidence of the timeline. They'd reported me missing while simultaneously kicking me out. The contradiction would be useful. My phone buzzed. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. Percy Curtis? A male voice, unfamiliar. Who's asking? My name's Martin Ramirez. Gail Thompson asked me to call you. Said you might need some professional help. What kind of professional? I'm a private investigator. Used to work with Gail back in her PD days. She told me about your situation. I'm interested in helping if you're interested in hiring. I hesitated. I don't have much money right now. Gail mentioned that. Here's the thing, Mr. Curtis. I owe Gail. She saved my career once. Long story. So I'm willing to work on contingency. You pay me when you can, after this gets resolved. Deal? Something in his voice reminded me of the straight shooters I'd worked with in business. The guys who didn't play games, who delivered what they promised. What would you do exactly? Surveillance, background checks, financial investigations, whatever you need to build your case. Gail said your son and daughter-in-law might have some professional skeletons. I'm good at finding skeletons. How good? He laughed, a dry sound. In my line of work, everyone has secrets. It's just a question of how deep you're willing to dig. We talked for 20 minutes. By the end, I'd agreed to hire Martin Ramirez, payment deferred, to dig into Jeffrey and Shannon's professional lives. It felt reckless, trusting a stranger on a phone call, but reckless was better than helpless. After we hung up, I stared at the ceiling, listening to the AC rattle and hum. Somewhere across Phoenix, Jeffrey and Shannon were probably celebrating. Probably already spending my money in their heads, planning their upgraded life, congratulating themselves on getting rid of the old man. And that's when I understood how to repay them. Not with violence or confrontation, but with patience. With documentation. With the slow, methodical destruction of everything they'd built on lies. They wanted to play games with legal documents and insurance policies. Fine. I'd play too. But I'd been in business for 42 years. I knew how to read contracts, how to find leverage, how to wait for the perfect moment to strike. They thought they were predators, but they'd forgotten something important. I'd survived in this city for decades, built a business from nothing, navigated recessions and competitors, and every challenge the market could throw at me. I wasn't prey, I was just older, slower, and considerably more patient than they expected. The hunt was about to begin, and this time I was the one doing the hunting. 2 days later, I sat across from Russell Green in his office on North Central Avenue. The place hadn't changed much in 3 years. Same dark wood furniture, same diplomas on the wall, same view of downtown Phoenix through floor-to-ceiling windows. Green himself had aged a bit, more gray in his hair, but his eyes were sharp as ever when I laid out the documents on his desk. "Life estate provision," he said, tapping the deed. "Clear as day. They had no legal right to evict you. Can we sue?" "Sue? Percy, this is slam-dunk territory. Illegal eviction, breach of contract, possibly elder abuse depending on how we frame it." He leaned back in his chair. "Question is, how far do you want to take this?" "All the way." Green studied me. "You understand this will get ugly. Your son will fight back. Family lawsuits always get nasty." "My son tried to have me killed for insurance money. I think we're past nasty." That got his attention. I told him about Gail's warning, about Jeffrey's car circling the street at 3 a.m. Green's expression shifted from professional interest to something harder. "You have proof of this?" "A witness, former detective. She heard them planning it." "That's conspiracy to commit murder. That's criminal, Percy. We need to involve police." "No," I said it firmly. "Not yet. Police get involved, it becomes their case, their timeline. I want to control this. I want them to understand what they did before the cops take over." Green was quiet for a long moment. I could lose my license for not reporting this. "Then I'll find another lawyer." I didn't say I wouldn't help. I said it's risky. He pulled out a legal pad. "Walk me through everything, every detail. I need to know what we're working with." I spent an hour laying it all out. The house transfer, Shannon's pressure for the savings, the frozen bank account, the Facebook posts claiming I was missing. Green took notes, occasionally stopping me to ask clarifying questions. When I finished, he sat back, tapping his pen against the pad. "Here's how I see it. We file for restoration of your life estate rights, claim illegal eviction, demand compensation for damages. That's the straightforward play. But you mentioned something about wanting leverage? They're not clean. Jeffrey's a financial consultant. Shannon's in real estate. They cut corners. I know it." Knowing and proving are different things. "I have someone looking into it. Private investigator." Green raised an eyebrow. "Working with a PI. You've thought this through." "I've had nothing but time to think." "All right. Here's what we do. I file the civil suit, get the ball rolling legally. That puts them on defense, forces them to respond. While that's happening, your PI digs up whatever dirt exists on their professional lives. We find violations, we report them to the relevant regulatory boards. Arizona Department of Insurance for your son, Department of Real Estate for Shannon. Hit them from multiple directions." "How long will this take?" "Civil suit, we can file within a week. Get a hearing scheduled maybe a month out, depending on the court calendar. Regulatory investigations, those move slower. Could be months before anything happens. I'm living in a $40 a night motel, Russell. I don't have months. You have your credit card, you have options, and once we file the suit, we can request an emergency injunction to let you back in the house immediately. Judge might grant it, might not. Depends on how sympathetic they are." I thought about that. The idea of going back to Desert Willow Drive, walking past Jeffrey and Shannon, reclaiming my space. It was tempting, but something felt off about it. No injunction yet. Let them think they're safe. Let them make mistakes. Green smiled, a thin lawyer's smile. "You're playing chess while they're playing checkers. I like it." We spent another hour going over strategy. Green would need a retainer, $5,000. I didn't have it, but I had the warehouse property. We agreed to use that as collateral, sign a lien against it. The property was worth maybe $30,000, more than enough to cover legal fees. "One more thing," Green said as I was leaving. "You mentioned the bank account being frozen. Your son did that?" "I assume so. I don't know how." "I'll look into it. If he doesn't have legal authority, that's another violation. financial elder abuse. Arizona takes that seriously. Leaving his office, I felt lighter than I had in days. The plan was taking shape. Not just revenge, but systematic, legal destruction of everything they'd stolen. They wanted to play with documents and legal technicalities. Fine. I'd hired someone who spoke that language fluently. The next morning, Martin Ramirez called with his first report. We met at a diner on Indian School Road, one of those places that served breakfast all day and didn't ask questions. Martin was younger than I expected, maybe mid-40s, with the weathered look of someone who spent a lot of time in the sun. "Your son's sloppy," he said, sliding a folder across the table. I pulled his professional filings, cross-referenced with client complaints. Found 3 instances in the past year where clients lost significant money on his recommendations. All high-risk investments, all with the same brokerage firm. That's normal market risk, isn't it? Would be, except your son got referral fees from the brokerage. Undisclosed referral fees. That's a conflict of interest. Violation of his fiduciary duty. Arizona Department of Insurance would love to know about this. I opened the folder. Bank statements, email printouts, transaction records. Martin had been thorough. "How did you get all this?" "Better you don't know the details. Let's just say people are careless with their digital security. Shannon's no better, by the way. Found evidence she's been using inside information on property sales. Tells her buyers about listings before they hit the market. Inflates prices using friendly appraisers. Classic kickback scheme." "This is enough to report them?" "More than enough. Question is timing. You report now, investigations start immediately. Could take months to resolve, but they'll be under scrutiny, stressed, making more mistakes. Or you wait, use it as leverage later." I thought about Russell Greene's strategy, multiple angles of attack. Report it, anonymously if possible. I can do that. File complaints through shell email accounts. Make it look like it's coming from concerned clients or competitors. They won't know it's you until much later. Do it. Martin nodded, closed the folder. "Gail said you're a good man in a bad situation. I'm inclined to agree. But Percy, you need to understand. Once you start this, there's no stopping it. These kinds of investigations, regulatory actions, lawsuits, they take on a life of their own. Your son and daughter-in-law's lives are going to implode. Professionally, financially, maybe even criminally. You comfortable with that?" I thought about Jeffrey's car circling the street at 3 a.m. Thought about Shannon's cold dismissal, the 2-hour eviction deadline, the manufactured Facebook posts. Thought about 40 years of building something only to have it stolen by the people I'd trusted most. "Yes," I said, "I'm comfortable with that." The following week passed in a blur of preparation. Russell Greene filed the civil suit on a Monday. By Wednesday, Jeffrey and Shannon had been served. Greene called to tell me Shannon had phoned the office, screaming about harassment, threatening countersuits. He'd calmly explained that everything in the filing was documented fact, and suggested she get her own lawyer. Martin filed the regulatory complaints on Friday. Anonymous, professional, backed with documentation that would be impossible to dismiss. The Arizona Department of Insurance opened an investigation into Jeffrey's practices. The Department of Real Estate flagged Shannon's license for review. I spent my days in the motel, rationing my credit card, eating cheap food from convenience stores. $23 a day, I'd calculated. That's what I could afford, and still have enough for the motel room. It was humbling, degrading even, but it also clarified things. Stripped away everything except the essential question, what kind of man was I going to be in response to this? I could have crumbled, could have given up, accepted the role of victim, maybe even found a way to forgive them and move on. That would have been the noble path, probably. But nobility doesn't pay for motel rooms. Nobility doesn't stop someone from circling your house at 3 a.m. with murder on their mind. Nobility, I was learning, was a luxury I could no longer afford. Gail stopped by one evening with groceries. Bread, peanut butter, some fruit. Nothing fancy, but it meant I could save a few dollars. "You're doing the right thing," she said, sitting on the edge of the motel bed while I made a sandwich. "I know it doesn't feel like it. I know it feels like you're being vindictive, petty. But you're not. You're surviving. Surviving feels a lot like revenge. Sometimes they're the same thing." She paused. Martin told me about the complaints. Said the regulatory boards are already moving on them. That's fast. Good. Jeffrey and Shannon are going to figure out it's you eventually. When they do, they'll come after you hard. Harder than before. Let them. She looked at me carefully. You've changed. 2 weeks ago, you were the guy who gave his last $40 to a homeless woman. Now you're something else. Maybe I'm just finally becoming who I should have been all along. Or maybe, Gail said quietly, you're becoming what they made you. I didn't have an answer for that. Maybe she was right. Maybe in trying to fight monsters, I was turning into one myself. But if that's what it took to survive, to reclaim what was mine, then so be it. That night, lying in the dark, listening to the motel's AC struggle against the Phoenix heat, I thought about the Corvette sitting in my garage. Thought about 42 years of building something from nothing. Thought about the boy who used to hand me tools and the man who tried to have me killed. And I understood, finally, that this wasn't about the house or the money or even justice. It was about proving that kindness wasn't weakness, that age wasn't helplessness, that being thrown away didn't mean you stayed thrown away. The pieces were in place, the lawsuit filed, the investigation started, the evidence gathered. Now came the hard part, waiting, letting the system work, trusting that the truth, properly documented and professionally presented, would be enough. Outside, Phoenix hummed with life. Cars passed, people lived, the city continued. Somewhere out there, Jeffrey and Shannon were probably just now realizing their world was starting to crack, and that's when I understood how to repay them. Not with a single strike, but with patience. With pressure, with the slow, methodical tightening of legal and financial nooses, until they had nowhere left to run. They'd taught me something valuable. Family wasn't about blood or loyalty or love. It was about power, about who had it and who didn't. For 4 years they'd had the power. But power, I was learning, was just another thing you could take away from someone if you were patient enough, smart enough, and angry enough to see it through. The hunt had begun, and I was going to enjoy watching them realize, too late, that they'd underestimated the wrong old man. Early July brought Phoenix's monsoon season, those brief, violent storms that turned the desert into something almost alive. I watched one roll in from my motel window the day Russell Green called to tell me it was time. The lawsuit's ready to file, he said. Full petition for restoration of life estate rights, compensation for illegal eviction, emotional distress. I'm asking for $8,500 in damages plus legal fees. Conservative, but supportable. File it. Percy, once this goes public, they'll know you're coming. No more element of surprise. Good. I want them to know. 2 days later, Jeffrey and Shannon received the summons. I deliberately included my phone number in the court documents, a little breadcrumb for Shannon to find. I wanted that call. Needed it, actually. Wanted to hear the panic in her voice when she realized the old man she'd thrown away wasn't staying thrown away. The call came that evening. My phone lit up with Jeffrey's number, but I knew it wouldn't be him. He never had the spine for confrontation. You think you're clever? Shannon's voice came through hot enough to melt the phone. Filing a lawsuit? Are you out of your mind? Hello, Shannon. How's my house treating you? Your house? You signed it over, you senile old fool. It's ours now, and no amount of legal harassment is going to change that. I let her rant for a moment, listening to the specific tremor beneath her anger. Fear? She was afraid and trying to cover it with rage. Classic. Here's what's going to happen, I said, keeping my voice level, almost bored. You're going to hire a lawyer. That lawyer is going to read the deed and find the life estate provision that says I can live there until I die. Then that lawyer is going to explain to you what illegal eviction means in Arizona. Should be educational. We'll fight this. We'll prove you left voluntarily, that you have mental problems, that you're not competent to manage your own affairs. You're welcome to try. I had full medical and psychiatric evaluations done 2 weeks ago, cognitive function tests, memory assessments, the works. Came back perfect. My doctor was very thorough, almost like I was preparing for something. The silence on the other end stretched long enough that I thought she'd hung up. You planned this, she finally said, voice quieter now. You've been planning this whole thing. Shannon, I gave you my house. I was prepared to live out my retirement helping with grandkids I'll probably never meet. Working on my Corvette? Staying out of your way? You made a choice. You kicked me out in 100-degree heat with $40. You and Jeffrey then spent the next few weeks setting up an insurance fraud scheme. So yes, when someone tries to murder you for money, you tend to make plans. We didn't? Gail Thompson sends her regards, by the way. Former Phoenix PD detective. Amazing what she can hear when people talk on phones outside banks, thinking homeless people are invisible. She hung up. I smiled. First blood drawn. 3 days later, their countersuit arrived. Russell Green brought it to the motel personally, reading through it with the kind of amused disgust only lawyers can manage. They're claiming you left voluntarily due to age-related mental decline, he said. They're petitioning the court to declare you legally incompetent and assign Jeffrey as your guardian. Bold strategy. Bold and stupid. I have the medical reports. Exactly. They're panicking, making emotional decisions instead of strategic ones. This countersuit actually helps us. Shows consciousness of guilt, desperation. He paused. There's something else. I looked into your frozen bank account. Jeffrey used a power of attorney document to lock it. I never gave him power of attorney. No, but someone forged your signature. Badly, I might add. The bank accepted it because it was family, and no one looked too closely. That's criminal fraud, Percy. Elder financial abuse. If we pursue this, Jeffrey could face actual criminal charges. I thought about that. Jeffrey in handcuffs. Shannon watching her perfect life crumble. The satisfaction would be immense, but something in me hesitated. Hold that option in reserve, I said. Let's see how the civil case plays out first. The following week, I took another step. Through Gail's connections, I'd found Martin Ramirez, a private investigator who specialized in corporate fraud. We met at a coffee shop in Scottsdale, the kind of place where retired people nursed lattes and complained about the heat. Martin was compact, sharp-eyed, maybe 45, with the careful manner of someone who'd seen too much and trusted too little. Gail had vouched for him, said he was the best at finding things people wanted hidden. $3,500 a month, he said after I explained what I needed. That includes surveillance, financial records research, background checks. I'll document everything photographically and in written reports. Court ready. $3,500 was steep, but I had some money left from the warehouse property deal. Do it. I want to know everything. Where they go, who they meet, what they're planning. Gail mentioned they might be trying to sell the house. Shannon's a real estate agent. She'll have connections, ways to move property fast if she wants. I'll track any appraisals, buyer meetings, title searches. You'll know before the ink dries. He paused. Gail also said you're a good man in a bad situation. For what it's worth, I believe her. I was a good man. Now I'm just thorough. Martin smiled. Thorough works better anyway. His first report came within 72 hours. Photographs of Jeffrey and Shannon meeting with a property appraiser, documents showing they'd listed the house privately, off-market, trying to avoid attention. The asking price was $725,000, $40,000 over what the house was actually worth. Shannon was using her real estate connections to inflate the value, planning to pocket the difference. I studied the photos in my motel room, the AC rattling against July heat. Shannon looked confident in the pictures, Jeffrey nervous. They thought they were being clever, moving fast before the lawsuit could gain traction. They had no idea Martin was already 3 steps ahead, documenting everything. They found a buyer, Martin told me over the phone a week later. Cash offer $695,000. They dropped the price to move faster. Closing is scheduled for late August. Can we stop it? Depends. You'd need an injunction blocking the sale pending resolution of your life estate claim. That requires a court filing, probably a hearing. Takes time. I called Russell Green. How fast can you get me an injunction? 2 weeks if we're lucky. Judge has to approve it, and they'll want to see strong evidence you'll win the underlying case. We have that evidence. Then let's do it. But Percy, this is going to cost more. Court fees, emergency filings. Another $3,000 at least. I thought about my dwindling resources, the warehouse lien, the motel bills adding up. Thought about Jeffrey and Shannon celebrating their clever sale, thinking they'd outmaneuvered me. File it, I said, whatever it costs. The next 2 weeks were a masterclass in legal bureaucracy. Forms, affidavits, evidence exhibits. Russell worked fast, pushing everything through with the urgency of someone who genuinely enjoyed beating opposing counsel. The hearing was set for mid-August, just days before the scheduled house closing. Meanwhile, Martin kept feeding me information. Jeffrey meeting with his lawyer, looking haggard. Shannon at her real estate office, arguing with someone on the phone. They were stressed, fighting, blaming each other for the legal mess they were in. Good. Let them turn on each other. The Arizona Department of Insurance investigation into Jeffrey's practices was proceeding quietly in the background. Martin had confirmed they'd interviewed 3 of his former clients, people who'd lost money on his recommendations. The Department of Real Estate was similarly examining Shannon's transactions, looking for evidence of the kickback schemes Martin had documented. Neither Jeffrey nor Shannon knew these investigations existed yet. The regulatory boards moved slowly, carefully, building cases that would stand up to legal challenge. But eventually the hammer would fall. I just had to be patient enough to let it happen. Sitting in that motel room, eating another peanut butter sandwich, watching the sun set over Phoenix, I felt something shift inside me. Not satisfaction exactly, more like cold clarity. I'd spent my whole life being generous, trusting, believing family meant something sacred. Now I understood. Family was just another word people used when they wanted something from you. And when you stopped being useful, family disappeared faster than water in the desert. But I wasn't useless. I was dangerous. And Jeffrey and Shannon were about to learn the difference. Late July turned Phoenix into a furnace. Temperatures hit 115, 118, the kind of heat that made pavement bubble and air shimmer like water. I'd stopped noticing. Too focused on Martin's reports, Russell's legal filings, the slow tightening net around Jeffrey and Shannon. Martin's update came on a Tuesday, his voice tight with suppressed excitement. "You need to see this. Meeting you in 20 minutes. Same diner." The folder he slid across the table was thicker than before, packed with bank statements, email printouts, recorded phone conversations. I flipped through it, trying to understand what I was seeing. "Jeffrey's been running a scheme," Martin said, "moving client money into high-risk investment funds, getting kickbacks from the brokerage, 15% of every transaction. I've documented 6 instances over 18 months, totaling about $200,000 in hidden commissions. That's illegal, extremely. Violation of fiduciary duty, undisclosed conflicts of interest, possibly fraud. Arizona Department of Insurance will suspend his license immediately if they see this." I turned the pages. Shannon's transactions were equally damning. Insider information on property sales, inflated appraisals, kickbacks from friendly mortgage brokers, a systematic pattern of ethical violations. "We can file anonymous complaints," Martin said. "Make it look like concerned clients or industry competitors. They'll never know it came from you until much later. Do it, both of them. Percy, you understand what this means. These aren't just civil matters. This is career destruction. Jeffrey loses his financial advisor license. He's done in that industry. Shannon gets flagged by the real estate department. No agency will touch her." "I understand perfectly." Martin studied my face. "You're not the same man Gail described." "The guy who gave away his last $40? That man got thrown out of his house and nearly murdered. This is who's left." The complaints went out that Friday. Anonymous, professional, backed with documentation so thorough the regulatory boards had no choice but to investigate. Martin had crafted them perfectly, each one reading like a concerned industry insider, reporting legitimate violations. By the following Tuesday, the investigations had officially opened. Martin confirmed it through his contacts. Arizona Department of Insurance had assigned an investigator to Jeffrey's case. Department of Real Estate had flagged Shannon's license for immediate review. Jeffrey and Shannon had no idea yet. They were too focused on the pending house sale, the injunction hearing, the civil lawsuit. They thought those were their only problems. They were so beautifully, catastrophically wrong. The injunction hearing came on a Wednesday morning in mid-August. Russell Green had warned me the judge might not grant it, that blocking a property sale was serious business requiring strong evidence. But he'd prepared meticulously, assembling a case file that documented every aspect of the illegal eviction. I arrived at the courthouse early. wearing the one decent suit I'd packed in my suitcase. Russell met me outside, looking sharp in lawyer armor. "Remember, you don't have to testify today. I've got the evidence. Witnesses if needed. Just stay calm. Let me handle it." Inside, Jeffrey and Shannon sat with their attorney, a nervous-looking woman who kept shuffling papers. Shannon saw me enter, and her face went hard. Jeffrey wouldn't look at me at all. The hearing lasted 40 minutes. Russell presented the life estate deed, my medical evaluations, sworn statements from neighbors who'd witnessed the eviction. The neighbor's security camera footage was the clincher, grainy but clear enough to hear Shannon's voice. "Pack your things." "You've got 2 hours?" Their attorney tried arguing I'd left voluntarily, that the life estate was disputed. The judge, a silver-haired woman who looked like she'd heard every excuse twice, cut her off mid-sentence. "Counselor, the deed is explicit. Life estate until death. Your clients violated that provision. The injunction is granted. No sale of the property until this matter is resolved." Shannon's face drained of color. She turned to Jeffrey, hissing something I couldn't hear. He just stared at the table, shoulders slumped. Outside the courtroom, I caught up with them in the hallway. Shannon spun on me, eyes blazing. "Congratulations. You've delayed things by a few months. When we win this case, you'll owe us for every day we couldn't sell." "You made your choice. Now I'm making mine," I said quietly. "Choice?" She laughed, brittle and sharp. "You had a choice to be reasonable, to accept that you're old and need help managing your affairs. Instead, you're burning money on lawyers for a fight you can't win." "We'll see." Jeffrey finally looked at me then. For just a second, I saw something in his eyes that might have been regret. Then it was gone, replaced by that familiar glazed acceptance. I walked away feeling lighter than I had in weeks. The injunction meant the house sale was dead. They'd lost their escape route, their quick cash solution. Now they were stuck, committed to fighting a legal battle with mounting expenses and no end in sight. 2 weeks later, the first regulatory blow landed. Martin called me with barely contained glee in his voice. Arizona Department of Insurance suspended Jeffrey's license. 6 months, pending full investigation. He's effectively unemployed. How did he take it? According to my sources, he showed up at the department office demanding to know who filed the complaint. They wouldn't tell him, obviously. He left threatening legal action, but that's just noise. The evidence is solid. I let that sink in. Jeffrey's income was $8,200 a month, mostly from client commissions. Gone. All of it. 5 days later, Shannon got hit. The Department of Real Estate issued a formal warning and a $12,000 fine for ethical violations. Her real estate agency, unwilling to risk their reputation, quietly asked her to resign. Martin sent me the photos. Shannon leaving the agency office, face tight with fury, box of personal items in her arms. Jeffrey waiting in the car, looking like he'd aged 10 years in 10 days. I studied those photos in my motel room, trying to feel something, satisfaction maybe, triumph. But all I felt was cold efficiency. 2 targets marked, 2 targets hit. They still didn't know it was me. Martin's anonymous complaints had been perfect, untraceable. Jeffrey and Shannon were busy blaming competitors, industry rivals, everyone except the old man they'd thrown away. That oversight was going to cost them everything. The next move came from them, desperate and sloppy. Martin caught it immediately. They'd hired their own private investigator, someone trying to dig up dirt on Russell Green, looking for conflicts of interest or ethical violations. "They're flailing," Martin reported, "spending money they don't have on investigations that won't find anything. Green's clean, I already checked, but it shows how panicked they are." "How much money do they have left?" "Not much. Jeffrey's unemployment, Shannon's severance, maybe $30,000 between them. The house mortgage is $3,200 a month. They can't keep paying it long without income." The pieces were falling into place. No jobs, mounting legal bills, a house they couldn't sell and couldn't afford to keep. Every option closing, every escape route blocked. And they still thought they were fighting a simple eviction lawsuit, nothing more. On a Friday evening in late August, my phone rang. Jeffrey's number. I let it ring 3 times before answering. "Dad." His voice was rough, tired. "We need to talk." "I'm listening." "This lawsuit, the injunction, all of it. Can we just Can we work something out? Without lawyers? What did you have in mind? You can move back in. We'll figure out the life estate thing, make it official. Just drop the lawsuit. Stop the legal fees. I almost laughed. Jeffrey, you kicked me out in June heat with $40. You and Shannon tried to set up an insurance fraud scheme. Now you've lost your jobs and can't sell the house. And you want to negotiate? I didn't. We never. Gail Thompson heard you, on the phone, planning the accident, talking about the $800,000. So no, Jeffrey, we're not working anything out. You made your bed. Sleep in it. I hung up. That night, I allowed myself one moment of satisfaction. Not triumph, exactly. More like watching a complicated equation finally balance. They'd gambled that I was weak, helpless, someone they could discard without consequences. They'd been wrong. And now, piece by piece, move by move, I was proving exactly how wrong they'd been. The hunt wasn't over yet, but the prey was cornered, wounded, beginning to understand that the old man they'd underestimated was the most dangerous kind of opponent. Patient, thorough, and absolutely unwilling to forgive. September arrived with Phoenix's brutal, late summer heat, and with it came the regulatory hammer I'd been waiting for. Martin called early on the first Monday of the month, his voice carrying satisfaction. Arizona Department of Insurance just pulled Jeffrey's license. 6-month suspension, effective immediately. They cited multiple violations of fiduciary duty, undisclosed conflicts of interest, the whole package. I was eating breakfast at the motel, instant coffee and a gas station muffin. The news tasted better than the food. How did he react? According to my source at the department, he showed up demanding to speak with supervisors, threatened legal action, the usual. They escorted him out. He's done as a financial advisor, Percy. Even after the suspension ends, no firm will touch him with this on his record. $8,200 a month, gone. Just like that. What about Shannon? Department of Real Estate is moving slower, but they'll hit her soon. I've got confirmation they're reviewing all her transactions from the past 3 years. The next blow landed 9 days later. Shannon received official notice. Formal warning, $12,000 fine, and a mandatory ethics review. Her real estate agency, one of the larger firms in Scottsdale, made their decision within 48 hours. Martin sent me the photos. Shannon walking out with a cardboard box, her face a mask of barely controlled fury. I studied those images carefully. Jeffrey and Shannon had just lost both their incomes in the span of 10 days. The house mortgage was $3,200 a month. Their legal fees were mounting. The injunction had killed their quick sale, and they still had no idea who was orchestrating their collapse. That ignorance wouldn't last much longer. Martin's next report came a week later. Shannon hired a private investigator, guy named Derek Walsh. Former police, does corporate espionage work. He's digging into the regulatory complaints, trying to trace them back to the source. Can he? Eventually, yeah. The anonymous emails won't hold up to serious scrutiny. He'll trace them to my servers, and from there he might connect me to Gail, and Gail to you. Give him another week, maybe 2. Let him find it. I want them to know. Percy, are you sure? Once they know it's you. They'll what? They've already tried to kill me. They've already stolen my house and frozen my accounts. What's left for them to do? Martin was quiet for a moment. Fair point. But desperate people make desperate moves. Be careful. 5 days later, Shannon's investigator found what he was looking for. Martin confirmed it through his contacts. Walsh had traced the complaints back to Russell Greene's law firm. Not to me directly, but close enough. The confrontation came the following afternoon. Martin called, slightly out of breath. Jeffrey and Shannon just showed up at Greene's office, demanding to see whoever filed the complaints. Greene's stonewalling them, but Shannon's screaming loud enough that half the building can hear. What's she saying? Calling Greene a mouthpiece for harassment, threatening to sue for defamation, the works. Jeffrey's quieter, but you can see he's furious. They know someone's targeting them specifically, they just can't prove who yet. They'll figure it out soon enough. 2 days later, they did. Russell Greene called me personally, amusement clear in his voice despite the professional tone. Percy, Jeffrey, and Shannon just filed a lawsuit against you. Defamation, harassment, intentional infliction of emotional distress. They're asking for $200,000 in damages. Based on what evidence? based on their investigator connecting the regulatory complaints to my firm and me to you. It's circumstantial, but they're desperate. The lawsuit itself is garbage. We'll get it dismissed easily, but it shows they've figured out you're behind their problems. Good. How's the life estate case proceeding? Preliminary hearing is set for late September. I've assembled everything we need. The original deed with the life estate provision, your medical evaluations, witness statements from neighbors, financial records showing the frozen accounts. We're in excellent shape. What about the security footage? Your neighbor, Mrs. Chen, was very cooperative. The camera caught Shannon's voice clearly. Pack your things, you've got 2 hours. It's damning. The preliminary hearing arrived on a Thursday morning, unseasonably cool for late September in Phoenix. I dressed in my one good suit, the one I'd been saving in my suitcase since June, and met Russell outside the courthouse. Remember, he said, straightening his tie, you don't have to say anything. I'll do the talking. Just sit quietly and look dignified. I can manage dignified. Inside the courtroom, Jeffrey and Shannon sat with their attorney, a harried-looking woman named Patricia Reynolds, who'd probably taken their case out of desperation for clients. Shannon saw me enter, and her expression hardened into pure hatred. Jeffrey looked away, jaw clenched. I hadn't seen them in person since June. Jeffrey looked older, worn down by stress and unemployment. Shannon had lost weight, her designer clothes hanging slightly loose. Good. Let them feel a fraction of what I'd felt, standing on that sidewalk with $40 and nowhere to go. The hearing lasted 90 minutes. Russell presented our case with surgical precision. The life estate deed, explicitly stating my right to live in the house until death. My medical evaluations, proving I was mentally competent despite their claims otherwise. Witness statements from 3 neighbors who'd seen the eviction and heard Shannon's cold dismissal. Then came the security footage. Mrs. Chen's camera had captured everything. Shannon's voice, sharp and clear. Pack your things, Percy. Personal items only. You've got 2 hours. Jeffrey in the background, silent, complicit. Me carrying my suitcase down the driveway in 104-degree heat. I watched Jeffrey's face as the footage played. The color drained from his cheeks. He looked like a man watching his own execution. Shannon's hands clenched into fists, knuckles white. The judge, a silver-haired woman named Martinez, watched the footage twice. Then she looked at Jeffrey and Shannon with the kind of cold assessment that comes from seeing too many family betrayals. The life estate provision is explicit and unambiguous, she said. Mr. Curtis had the legal right to remain in the residence until his death. The eviction was unlawful. She paused. Furthermore, the evidence suggests premeditation and callousness that goes beyond a simple property dispute. She ruled in my favor. Full restoration of life estate rights. Immediate occupancy. $8,500 in compensatory damages for the eviction and my living expenses. Jeffrey and Shannon were ordered to vacate within 30 days. Outside the courtroom, in the marble-floored hallway, I caught up with them. Shannon spun around, eyes blazing. Congratulations, she hissed. You won your little court battle. Enjoy it. We'll appeal. We'll fight this for years if we have to. Appeal all you want, I said calmly. But before you do, you might want to ask yourselves a question. Jeffrey finally looked at me. What question? Who do you think filed those regulatory complaints? The ones that cost you both your jobs? Shannon's eyes narrowed. We know it was you working through that lawyer. Not Russell, I said. He just handled the civil case. The complaints to the Department of Insurance, the Department of Real Estate, those came from someone else. Someone you thought you could ignore. What are you talking about? Jeffrey's voice cracked slightly. I smiled. It wasn't a pleasant smile. You remember that homeless woman I gave my last $40 to? The one outside the Greyhound station? Shannon's face went pale. Actually pale, the color draining so fast I thought she might faint. That's right, I continued. Gail Thompson, former Phoenix PD detective. 18 years on the force before she got pushed out. She heard you, Jeffrey. Heard you on the phone outside Chase Bank, planning my accident. The $800,000 in life insurance. All of it. Jeffrey took a step back, actually stumbling. We never... Save it. Gail heard everything, warned me, helped me hide. And when you came looking for me that night at 3 in the morning, circling the streets like sharks, I was watching from my motel window. I saw you." At that moment, Gail herself appeared, walking down the hallway. I'd asked her to come today, to be here for this exact moment. She'd cleaned up, was wearing professional clothes, looked every inch the detective she used to be. "Hello, Jeffrey," she said calmly. "Shannon, remember me? You walked right past me that day, talking about how to kill your father for insurance money. Didn't even glance down. People never do look at the homeless." Shannon's mouth opened, but no words came out. She looked like someone had hit her with a hammer. "She helped me document everything," I continued. "Connected me with Martin Ramirez, another investigator. Martin's the one who found all those interesting financial irregularities in your businesses. The kickbacks, the conflicts of interest, the insider trading. He compiled it all nice and neat and sent it to the regulatory boards. You destroyed our careers," Shannon finally managed, her voice shaking. "No, you destroyed your own careers by being criminals. I just made sure the right people found out." Jeffrey looked between me and Gail, his face ashen. "Dad, we didn't actually murder me?" "No, because Gail warned me in time. But you planned it. You and Shannon planned to kill me, stage it as an accident, collect the insurance, and live happily ever after in my house with my money." I stepped closer. "You made one mistake, Jeffrey. One fatal mistake." "What's that?" he whispered. "You assumed kindness meant weakness. You thought the old man who gave his last $40 to a stranger was too soft to fight back." I let that sink in. "You were wrong." Shannon found her voice again, but it came out strangled. "This isn't over. We still own that house legally. We'll fight the appeal. You'll lose," I said simply. "And while you're busy fighting me in court, spending money you don't have on lawyers you can't afford, you might want to think about how you're going to make your mortgage payments. $3,200 a month, isn't it? No jobs, mounting legal bills, no prospects." I smiled again. "How long before the bank starts foreclosure proceedings, do you think?" I walked away then, Gail beside me, leaving them standing in that courthouse hallway, looking like their world had just imploded. Because it had. The courtroom victory should have been enough, should have been the end of it. But I'd learned something important over the past 4 months. People like Jeffrey and Shannon don't surrender, they double down. 3 days after the hearing, Russell Green called with a warning. They've filed for appeal, as expected, but they've also submitted new evidence claiming you coerced their original deed transfer through undue influence. It's desperate and won't hold up, but it'll drag things out another few months. Let them drag it out. They're hemorrhaging money they don't have. There's something else. Their attorney Reynolds filed a motion claiming the security footage was obtained illegally, that Mrs. Chen's camera violated their privacy rights. Again, it won't work, but she's trying everything. I sat in my motel room, looking at the legal bills piling up on the nightstand. Russell's fees, Martin's surveillance costs, court filing charges. I was down to maybe $15,000 left from the warehouse property deal. Every day they kept fighting cost me money I couldn't easily replace. How much will the appeal cost me? Another $5,000 minimum, maybe more if they keep filing frivolous motions. I did the math. My resources weren't infinite. If they could outlast me financially, if they could bleed me dry through endless legal warfare, they might still win through attrition. That's when I realized I needed to end this. Not in months, not in drawn-out legal battles, but soon, decisively, with a move they couldn't counter. Martin called later that same day. "Percy, I've been monitoring Jeffrey and Shannon's finances. They're in serious trouble. Credit cards maxed, bank accounts nearly empty. They missed last month's mortgage payment." "Missed it completely?" "Completely. Bank sent them a notice. They've got maybe 60 days before foreclosure proceedings start." An idea formed. Dangerous, aggressive, but potentially decisive. "Martin, can you find out how much they owe on the mortgage?" "I can do better than that. I can probably get you exact payoff numbers." "Why?" "Just get me the information." 2 days later, Martin delivered. The mortgage balance was $127,000. Jeffrey and Shannon had refinanced 18 months ago. taking out equity to pay for renovations Shannon had insisted on. The monthly payment was $3,200, and they were now officially 2 months behind. I called Russell Green. Can someone else buy out a mortgage in default? Technically, yes. Banks will sometimes sell distressed mortgages at a discount to avoid foreclosure costs. Why? Because I want to buy Jeffrey and Shannon's mortgage. There was silence on the line. Then, Percy, that's brilliant. If you own their debt, you control their options. You could force a foreclosure or offer them a settlement that gives you complete ownership. How much would the bank discount it? For a mortgage 2 months in default with unemployed borrowers? Maybe 20%. You could probably get it for around $100,000, maybe less. I did the math. I had $15,000 left. The warehouse property was worth maybe $30,000. I'd need to liquidate everything, borrow against anything I could. It would leave me with nothing in reserve, but it would end this. Set it up, I said. Whatever you need to do, I'll find the money. Russell worked fast. The bank, eager to avoid a messy foreclosure with unemployed debtors, agreed to sell the mortgage for $105,000. I sold the warehouse property, borrowed against my remaining savings, and made the purchase through an LLC Russell set up to hide my identity. By mid-October, I legally owned Jeffrey and Shannon's mortgage debt. They had no idea. Martin confirmed they'd missed a third payment. The bank's collection notices were now coming from Russell's LLC. Different letterhead, different name. Jeffrey and Shannon probably thought it was just a servicing transfer, routine paperwork they barely read. I waited until their fourth payment came due, waited until they were so far underwater they couldn't possibly swim back. Then I made my move. Russell sent them a formal letter, not from the LLC, from him directly, outlining that their mortgage had been purchased by a private party, outlining the terms of the debt, offering them two options. Option 1, continue paying $3,200 a month they didn't have, with all late fees and penalties, until the bank foreclosed and destroyed what little credit they had left. Option 2, sign a quitclaim deed transferring complete ownership of the house to the mortgage holder, and in exchange, have the entire debt forgiven. I included one additional detail. The mortgage holder was me. Their attorney Reynolds called Russell within hours, screaming about impropriety, conflict of interest, legal harassment. Russell calmly explained that everything was completely legal, that mortgage debt could be freely bought and sold, and that I was simply offering them a way out of inevitable foreclosure. Jeffrey called me directly the next day. No Shannon this time, just him. His voice was hollow, defeated. You bought our mortgage. I did. You're forcing us out of the house. No, Jeffrey. I'm offering you a choice. Sign over the deed voluntarily and walk away clean, or fight it and end up in foreclosure with destroyed credit and bankruptcy on your record. Your choice. This is revenge. You're punishing us. I'm collecting on a debt. If you'd rather I foreclose, I can do that. Takes longer, costs more, but the end result is the same. You lose the house either way. He was quiet for so long, I thought he'd hung up. Then, Shannon wants to fight this. She thinks we can find a legal angle. There is no legal angle. I own your debt. That's a fact. The only question is whether you want to make this easy or hard. How did it come to this, Dad? The question hung in the air between us. How did it come to this? How did we go from working on the Corvette together to this cold calculation of debt and ownership? You kicked me out in the heat with $40, Jeffrey. You planned to kill me for insurance money. You stole my house, froze my accounts, tried to have me declared incompetent, and you ask how it came to this? I never wanted. Shannon said it would be simple. Said you'd be fine, that you had plenty of money, that we deserved. Stop. I don't want to hear about what Shannon said. You're a grown man. You made your choices. Another long silence. Then, what happens if we sign? You walk away. Debt forgiven. No foreclosure on your record. You find an apartment somewhere. Start over. It's more than you deserve. And if we don't? Foreclosure. Bankruptcy. 7 years of destroyed credit. Every time you try to rent an apartment, get a job, buy a car, this will follow you. Your choice. He hung up without answering. 3 days later, Russell called. They're ready to sign. Shannon fought it apparently, wanted to take it to trial, But Jeffrey convinced her they're out of options. Patricia Reynolds negotiated one concession. They get 60 days to find a new place instead of 30. Agreed. I want this done. The signing happened on a Tuesday morning at a notary's office downtown. Carol Fisher, a professional notary Russell knew, handled the documents. Jeffrey and Shannon arrived separately, barely looking at each other. The stress had fractured whatever partnership they'd had. Shannon signed first, her hand shaking with rage. She wouldn't look at me. Jeffrey signed last. When he finished, he looked up at me with something that might have been regret. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. I didn't answer. Sorry didn't give me back the 4 months I'd spent in a motel. Sorry didn't erase the murder plot. Sorry was just a word people said when they got caught. Carol Fisher notarized the final documents. The house was mine again. Completely, legally, irrevocably mine. Jeffrey and Shannon left without another word. Through the window, I watched them get into separate cars, driving away to whatever cheap apartment they'd managed to scrape together. Russell shook my hand. "Congratulations, Percy. You won." "Did I?" He looked at me carefully. "You got your house back. You bankrupted the people who tried to destroy you. You exposed their crimes and ruined their careers. By any measure, yes, you won." I thought about that. Thought about victory and what it cost. Thought about the man I'd been in June, giving $40 to a homeless woman, and the man I'd become by October, buying mortgage debt to force my own son into homelessness. "I won," I agreed, "but I'm not sure what that makes me." Russell didn't have an answer for that. Neither did I. Outside, Phoenix continued its relentless existence. Cars passed, people lived, the city moved on, and I stood there holding documents that said I'd reclaimed everything they'd stolen, wondering why it felt less like victory and more like survival. The war was over. I'd won. But the cost of winning, I was beginning to understand, might be something I'd spend the rest of my life calculating. October brought the final collapse. Martin called early in the month. 3 of Jeffrey's former clients filed a class action lawsuit. $340,000 for investment losses. They'll win. Department of Insurance already documented his violations. Days later, Shannon's agency fired her. Ethics violations made her toxic. She was blacklisted across Phoenix real estate. The bank confirmed Jeffrey and Shannon had missed 3 mortgage payments. $3,200 a month they couldn't afford. Foreclosure was coming. That's when I made my final move. "Can I buy their mortgage debt?" I asked Russell Green. Silence. Then, "Percy, that's ruthless. You'd control everything." "How much?" $105,000. Bank wants it gone. I liquidated everything. The warehouse, my remaining savings. By mid-October, through Russell's LLC, I owned Jeffrey and Shannon's mortgage. They didn't know until Russell sent the formal notice. Their mortgage had been purchased. 2 options. Keep paying $3,200 monthly until foreclosure, or sign a quitclaim deed transferring ownership back to me. In exchange, $127,000 in debt forgiven. The mortgage holder was Percy Curtis. Jeffrey called that evening, voice hollow. "You bought our mortgage." "I did." "You're forcing us out. I'm offering you a choice. Walk away clean or let foreclosure destroy you." "Why?" "You kicked me out with $40, Jeffrey, planned to murder me, and you're asking why?" 3 days later, Russell called. "They'll sign." Shannon fought it for hours, but they're out of options. The signing was at Carol Fisher's notary office. Jeffrey and Shannon arrived separately, barely speaking. Shannon looked aged, hollow. Jeffrey's shoulders slumped in defeat. Carol explained the documents. Shannon signed first, hand shaking with rage. She slammed the pen down, refusing to look at me. Jeffrey signed last. His face was gray. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. I didn't answer. Sorry was too small. Carol notarized the signatures. The house was mine. They left without another word, walking to separate cars, separate lives, heading to whatever cheap apartment they'd found. Russell shook my hand. "You won." Standing there holding those papers, I felt less triumph than expected, just cold satisfaction that justice had been served. "Yes," I said, "I won." Late October, I moved back into my house on Desert Willow Drive. Same suitcase I'd packed in June. 4 months to reclaim what should never have been taken. Inside felt foreign. Shannon's redecorating everywhere. My memories erased. The Corvette waited in the garage under its tarp, untouched. Small mercy. Gail helped me clean and reorganize. "You did it," she said over coffee. "I wasn't sure you could." We did it. Without your warning, I'd be dead. I'd helped her too. Found her security work through old contacts. Paid her first month's rent. $950 for dignity restored. Martin's final report arrived. Jeffrey worked insurance now. $3,100 monthly. Shannon cashiered at a grocery store. $2,400. Combined barely covered their $1,400 apartment rent, utilities, food. The $340,000 lawsuit proceeded, threatening wage garnishment for decades. They'd lost everything through greed and betrayal. I felt no triumph, just satisfaction that the equation balanced. 3 weeks later, Jeffrey called. "Dad, I wanted to say..." Don't apologize or explain." "Why did this happen?" I looked at the Phoenix sunset. "Because family isn't a transaction. You treated me like an asset instead of a person. You kicked me out with $40, and I gave them to a homeless woman who saved my life. That kindness saved me. Your greed destroyed you. If I could take it back, you can't. What's done is done." I hung up and went to the garage. The Corvette waited. Restoration unfinished after 20 years. But I had time now. I opened the garage door, turned on the radio, picked up my tools. The engine needed work. Brakes needed overhaul. Months of projects ahead. Some would call me vindictive. Maybe. But I'd learned the difference between kindness and weakness. Kindness is helping when you can. Weakness is letting others destroy you. I'd been kind to Gail. That saved my life. I'd been weak with Jeffrey and Shannon. That nearly killed me. The Corvette's engine turned over rough but alive. Outside, Phoenix hummed. Somewhere, Jeffrey and Shannon finished shift work, counting pennies, paying for their choices. I didn't hate them. They'd become what they always were, people facing consequences. I was just the man who ensured those consequences arrived. The tools felt right in my hands. For the first time since June, I felt peace. Not happiness, but peace. A man who'd survived, fought back, won. I worked until stars came out. Then I cleaned my tools, walked inside my house. My house. Those words meant everything now. In the kitchen, I reviewed the legal papers. Ownership documents, court orders, victory records. I'd won completely. Tomorrow I'd wake in my bed, my house, and continue rebuilding the life they'd tried to steal. Justice requires patience, calculation, willingness to become harder. But I'd learned underestimating kindness as weakness is fatal. Jeffrey and Shannon learned too. Just too late. I raised my coffee in silent toast, then went to bed in the house I'd fought 4 months to reclaim. Justice, cold and complete, was served. Life continued. If you like this story, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your impressions of this story in the comments. To listen to the next story, click on the box on the left. Thank you for watching.